Hey, this is Raquel, and you are at the Sensual Sessions podcast, the place to explore sensing pleasure through your senses and moving in a way that is free from inhibition and full of self expression. To make sure to get these episodes delivered on your inbox weekly, go to my website www.candiaraquel.com, which is my name, candiaraquel.com. And today we have a very special guest. This is Charna Cassell. She's a licensed psychotherapist specialized in sexuality and trauma. And she has also a unique somatic approach as a master somatic leader in this wonderful experience of finding delight in your body. Welcome, Charna. I am very happy to have you here.
Thank you for having me. I look forward to talking.
So tell us, how did you discover like this interest towards intimacy, pleasure, sensuality, and and all of its layers, not only the psychological aspect, but the embodied aspect.
Yeah. So long answer. Um, I had an absence of it. I had an absence of being able to tolerate being in my body, being with sensation, being with pleasure, even any kind of turn on. As a teenager, I can remember having a crush on somebody and them making eye contact with me and feeling like I was going to have a panic attack. So you may have heard of the window of tolerance. I call it the window of capacity to be with. So how big is your window of capacity to be with emotions and sensations before you get overwhelmed and you go into a triggered trauma response? And so I had a very tiny window because of trauma, specifically just the range of traumas from in utero birth, physical, sexual, emotional trauma. Um, and so I was very curious and interested, and I came out as a teenager. And even though I had crushes on boys, I had a lot of anxiety about men and boys. Um, and any kind of sexual interaction I had as a teenager with a boy, I would dissociate. And so I got very curious, whether it was researching rape prone, rape free societies, whether it was in my art. And then I started working as a sexuality educator. And then synchronistically, I discovered a book called The Survivor's Guide to Sex, which was written by Stacey Haynes. It's renamed Healing Sex at this point, but it was a somatic approach to healing from sexual trauma. And so, I see this, there's kind of a track of embodiment and there's the track of sexuality, and they wove together in my mid 20s. And I can, speak more specifically about embodiment, and I can speak more about sexuality, but when they wove together, um, I started in a somatic survivors group in my mid 20s with Stacy, and I was working at Good Vibrations. And so I was doing a lot of sexuality education, talking to other people about sex toys and how to increase their pleasure and their anatomy, and helping women finding their, clitoral legs and discovering orgasm and their G spots and da da da. And I was simultaneously having my own sexual awakening. Um, while I had come out, didn't really discover sexual pleasure for myself until my late 20s, like I'd say, like, actually, I guess early mid 20s. Um, and then it just deepened in working at Good Vibrations. I was really working on feeling safer in my body through the somatic work, and being okay with being a sexual being, not a queer being, or interested in men, or whatever, however you want to label it. Like, just even being a sexual being and finding pleasure was something that I was embracing in my mid 20s.
I love it, like being okay with being a sexual person, like not being a queer or super into boys or whatever. And I feel I am Mexican and live in Mexico, and we live in like two-sided moralistic culture where you see like crazy things here and that are not even talked about. And I believe it's almost as if women's sexuality and pleasure has been erased and has been like, yeah, it's not even talked about or considered because in a way in macho culture everything that relates to women is in the service of men, meaning objectification. So
Mhm.
for example, if I have seen it with my friends that if the guy is not in the mood, then sex is not happening. Or if the guy had a heart attack and lost their erectile potency, then there's no more sex for any of those. Or so there's no yeah, there's not an us in intimacy that
Mm.
that is brutal now that I am like realizing as I am speaking to you. So I feel it's super important to at least become curious about oneself and wonder how one feels in regards to one's pleasure and one's sexuality. And yeah, like wonder what is going on in there if you haven't done already, because a lot of times there's this idea that if I'm desirous, then there's something wrong with me. Like here, Hispanic culture, it's like, oh, you are like slutty or promiscuous or whatever. And the other side of that coin is to be almost a frigid, uh, starved virgin. So it's like
Yeah.
there's no possible way to not even to please yourself, but
Mhm.
to please a man in this. It's a double bind of being in the hooked in the Madonna whore like
Exactly.
complex, like
Mm.
and you see it a lot in culture. Like even my friends from high school, I remember their conversations that they wanted to marry a virgin, but they wanted to have a lover. So it's also like
Yeah.
common that people have the official house and the small house. Like the lover is not married with the guy, but the guy also have kids, and that's complete. I don't know if I am getting triggered or something, but that is something that is going on. I don't know how it is in the States. Probably there are some kinds of this cultural thing going on. So I want to ask you, like, what is the first step to safely begin a self-inquiry in regards to one's sexuality?
Yeah. Hold that. Can you hold the question? Because I want to speak
Yeah,
to, you
yeah,
said many things.
yeah.
And so, one of the things you're talking about, like the virgin whore dichotomy, and there's a love lust split that absolutely exists. I know, yes, there's machismo culture, and then you add like Catholicism on top of it, and yet it is, I mean, in the United States, as you may know, given it's now wanting to be, it's being called the Gulf of the United States or America. I mean, it's insane what's happening over here. Fundamentalist Christianity, there's no room for women's pleasure. There's the same virgin whore dichotomy, love less split, right? And so that's a pervasive way to keep women out of their power, and disconnected from self, disconnected from knowing what feels good and what they want, subjugating them, right? Um, so yeah, I think that's a universal in most cultures. Even in cultures that are more sex positive, there's still tremendous sexism. Um, but so then back to your question.
Back to my question.
Yeah.
Yeah, what's the first step to safely begin a self-inquiry in regards to one's sexuality? Like, what's the
Yeah,
first step to say, like, am I stuck into trying to be the ideal whore or the ideal virgin or the whatever the fuck?
yeah,
Or am I, yeah, like, what's the first step and what to expect? Because
yeah.
just as I began talking, like, a lot of things were moved inside of me. So, like, what what is the first step and what can one expect when the answers start to come up?
Yeah, so I think it's important to acknowledge that what's the right first step for one person is not
Okay,
necessarily the right first step for somebody else,
okay,
right? That we are, um, there is a lot of variation in what our starting points and what we need. So, one client comes to me and we're doing physical practices. Another client can't take a deeper breath without feeling like they're gonna, come undone. And so it just really depends on where you're starting. So, however I answer, I just want whoever's listening to know that there's nothing wrong with where they are. Um, so that said, I would generally speaking embodiment, right? So being able to start to tolerate and be with what's happening in your body and listening internally for what the signals are. And I think that starting if pleasure is something that feels like there hasn't been permission for pleasure, there's pleasure in our senses, right? There's pleasure in like a soft cashmere sweater. There's pleasure in warm, your toes in warm sand. There's pleasure in like the perfect, sip of coffee. There's pleasure in like the sun on your face, in listening to birds, like all these ways. So first I would say start to explore like what just feels good. The word pleasure could be too triggering for somebody, right? So what feels good? Do you know what feels good? And some people don't even know what feels good because that it hasn't been about their needs, right? It's especially outside of the United States, which is an I culture. In we cultures, it's more like, what does my mother or father need or want from me, right? What's better for the collective? So putting your hands underneath your belly button and seeing it, you even feel your hands on your body? Can you take a deeper breath into your hands? Do you know what your pelvic floor is? Right? As a Pilates instructor, you like I would well, I'll talk about Pilates in a minute. That's a side note. That was a good introduction to my pelvic floor. Um, Instead of what Pilates does, it teaches you to pull up, actually soften. So the your pelvic floor you can think of as if you were going to stop your pee or bear down and make a bowel movement. Breathe out like a soft sigh. You can call it a cervical sigh. Or men
Ah,
breathe out your assholes. So breathing down and out, softening into this part of your body, which that's huge. That could be a lot for somebody, right? Um, and starting to notice throughout your day in small moments what feels good, right? So that's a number one starting place because in order to say yes to things, like to yes to pleasure, you also have to be able to say no to what doesn't feel good and what you don't want. So embodied boundaries is the next piece, right? So being able to actually not just say no rigidly, say no to everything, which was what I did as a teenager. I had a big, big no, 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 no. um, Before you can start to allow, like, or earlier before that we started recording, you were talking about part of sensuality and sexuality, the importance of curiosity and spontaneity, which I agree with. And you can't, if you don't feel safe, it's really hard to allow spontaneity and curiosity because you have to know and you have to have things planned and organized, right? So, yeah, that
yeah,
was it. I will
yeah,
pause.
I love it. Embodiment, like, notice what's the opinion of your body. because sometimes we are more worried about being desired by the guy than just knowing if we are actually into the guy.
Mm-hmm.
And even then it's not enough. Like it's not enough that he's my crush and wow, it seems that I am his crush too. Wow, yay. But that's just like, okay, we matched on real life or on Tinder or Bumble or whatever. But
Mm-hmm.
then what does my body say?
Mm-hmm.
And then it can be shocking to realize that, okay, I am not getting the embodied answer that I would rationally expect. Like, I am supposed to be super turned on and I am not feeling turned on. And what's going on? So I believe there's a huge, well, so that's about first step is embodiment, like noticing what's your own personal step to begin. Like if you are already comfortable with the concept of pleasure, sexual pleasure, maybe that's too much, maybe that's threatening. So how about taking a little step backward and just exploring what feels good? Like, okay, how does my sweater feels like? How does the chirping of the birds sound like? Am I enjoying it? And maybe even a prior step could be just to notice what is no problem. Okay, so I am safe here. Is there any problem around? Okay, there's no problem. And then you can have your embodied consent. That is not what comes from the roof of our heads according to what society or your grandma uh, tells you to do. Like, oh, I remember my grandmother telling me like, ah, that guy, like, if you're interested, he could marry you. And I was like, no.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like, okay, thank you for the advice. And yeah, the guy was interested, but we fortunately live in a moment where we have more freedom as women, and it's important that we become aware of that freedom and use it and like deliberately make our choices, and especially our choices from an embodied place. So my next question is about the self-judgment in regards to pleasure or lack of thereof. I remember a guy that I was dating. He asked me out of nowhere, but are you sensitive? And I was like, what? What the fuck? Should I just get up and leave? And like he was like evaluate like prospecting me, like evaluating my worth, not only in regards to my beauty, which I am more or less used to being objectified by my looks, but also about my sensitivity to pleasure and my responsiveness. And I was like, okay, I am feeling objectified on another level. Like now it's not only an obligation to be pretty, now it's also an obligation to feel pleasure. But how can one feel pleasure if it's an obligation? And yeah, my question, what would be, yeah, how to manage, how to reframe the tendency to default into feeling that there's something wrong with you. Like, I am not pretty enough, I am not sensitive enough. And normally that is, I am not enough, but in regards to a male gaze.
Yeah. Yeah. I also want to respond to what you were talking about earlier, and I see them as being connected, which is, um, you know, how do you experience yourself as a separate self, right? Not just in response to. So you were talking about crushes. It's like, how do I know, um, do I want to act on this just because this person has desire for me? Do I actually have desire for them? Right? Even someone who's a gorgeous human, like you could be you could be kissing them and feel nothing. And you discover you have no chemistry, right? Um, so here you are in a situation where like you're talking about the male gaze, and there's conditioning and there's performative desire, like you were saying, like, oh, um you know, maybe there's somebody who's an exhibitionist and they get really turned on by being looked at and by being objectified, but what is underneath that is, is that a kink for them? Is it genuine? Or is it more about what I'm supposed to do, what I should do, how I need to be, because that's what movies and my family and culture tell me I need to be? Um, so being able to come back to, and what you also spoke to is an important one, which is like men who are like, I can make you come, you know,
Yeah,
I can give you multiple orgasms, and they're very attached to if they have a female partner, that partner having an orgasm, which can become pressure on their partner, and which sends their partner into their head rather than being able to be in the present moment. Both people are like more goal oriented versus being in the present moment and being connected. Um, and so that is something, I've definitely, when I worked at Good Vibrations, I encountered a lot, like, we need to get her to come. Um, and so it's an extension of their ego, whether or not their partner is having an orgasm, rather than it's that I want to um, bring you pleasure. What is going to bring you pleasure? Can we get curious about that? Right.
yeah, yeah, it becomes an extension of the ego. And you put it very clearly, like one can become objectified as an element of the goal achieving of the guy.
Mm,
And
I call it sport fucking. Like even the opposite, even a guy who's like, I'm multi-orgasmic. I can retain my semen, and look at me. And I've had that experience of being with somebody who was like counting their orgasms, and it was like, I'm just a hole here. Like, this is absurd. This does not produce more desire to do this again with you. I don't feel connected to you. I don't feel seen by you. I don't feel like your heart at all. So when it's like genitals disconnected from heart, that's a very unsatisfying experience to be with.
yeah, yeah, it's like literally feeling like the guy just didn't want to spend money on an inflatable doll, and there you are counting the cracks in the ceiling and waiting for the thing to be
Yeah.
like maybe there are women that have never faked an orgasm, but I
I've
once
I've never done that.
you never faked an orgasm. I am very happy. You're the first person that I know because I have polled my my best friends, even my Pilates clients, the ones that have become my friends. I asked them like, "Have you ever faked?" No. So what do? You just say like, "I am getting bored."
Well, I mean, you mean if you want the person to stop,
Well, no,
like
like
what's the function? So here, first I would say, like, what's the function of faking an orgasm? What is the hope? Is it to make the person stop? Is it to stroke their ego? Like what? Because it can be there
yeah,
can be many reasons why somebody would do that. Do they
Yeah,
feel inadequate? They don't have orgasms, so then they're
yeah,
what's it about?
that's a great question. So I'm gonna ask myself, why have I faked orgasms? I think primal motivator was to not make him feel bad about himself,
Right.
though I was trying. But then it's like a kind of lying, like, yeah. And I think what goes deeper is a fear that we are not really connected on intimacy, and therefore anything. Like, okay, the guy is not feeling me nor sensing me, and I am really not liking that and not really feeling that I am loving him.
Yeah.
But I believe that this is my problem,
Mm,
something is wrong with me, and by internalizing the problem, I might have gotten a sense of control, saying like, if it's my problem, I can fix it and I can fix us.
mm. So all the like the emotional labor, the protecting his ego, a fear of like if he doesn't think that I'm having an orgasm, it's symbolic of a deeper problem in the rest of the relationship. Maybe he won't want to be with me if I don't have an orgasm and all of that. And so there's a lot of conditioning, right? So part of it, it's like, I mean, it's so funny when guys are like, I've never been with someone who has an issue before, and it's like, yeah, well, have they revealed that? Have they let you know that what you're doing doesn't feel good? And of course, what feels good to one person is not going to always feel good to another person, right? We all need different kinds of touch. Um, but I think for me, it's been more about, first of all, I was having sex with women before I was having sex with men. So my expectations were different. I came to sex late in life with men. Um, Penetrative sex, manual sex as a teenager was absolutely unsatisfying and terrible with boys. And so one was an ability to direct them and give them feedback when things were not working or feeling good so that they're not like poking in the dark. So I think that probably ensured, and also my choice of like who I chose to be with. I also didn't have the run of like, you know, up until 30. So those were a lot of years of bad sex that people are probably having with boys, right? Boys that didn't have a lot of resources. Um, So I think the more permission you have to actually ask for what you want, give the person feedback and direction, say stop, right? Versus just dissociate, because that was the strategy I had as a teenager, was just like what you're saying, stare at the crack on the ceiling, stop breathing, go away, versus saying we can stop now. Like what you basically said, you're like, or I'm okay. I'm okay. We that
Yeah,
that's enough, right?
yeah, and feeling that it's not even about having the right or deserving. Like, you need no justification to say stop. You want to stop
Yep.
just like that. And yeah, wow. I I had a pretty much like respectful upbringing, in the sense that, okay, my mom and both grandmothers
Mhm.
worked and had their own money, and my mom got divorced when she wanted and everything. But still, like, I am realizing, like, okay, this is me, that I have some like mm, respectful cushioning in my upbringing, but for lots of women that are more, yeah, they have their ego identified to their men wanting them.
Mm-hmm.
And
Their value is related to how desired they are by a man.
Yeah, yeah. And now I am just seeing a parade in my memory of my first Pilates students like 20 years ago when I was an instructor at the most like posh pseudo exclusive places where 80% of the women that took my classes were trophy wives, and
Mm-hmm.
they were so aggressive to their bodies, and like
Mm-hmm.
they were starving and yeah, super pretty, but this idea of having having to work hard to be more beautiful to deserve what? Because now I think of their bodies and maybe they had orgasms, but those, like I am getting a sense of their quality of movement
Mm-hmm.
that is not the kind of tone one has when it's fully trusting and confident about oneself.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah. I think there's something I want to say here that's important about the difference between being really fit and being embodied, right? I've had people who are like Ironman marathon winners. All my first initial practice clients were dancers and Pilates people because that's the world I was in. Um, and so there's a difference between having a gorgeous fit body and knowing what feels good and feeling safe occupying your physical space.
yeah, yeah, which brings me to true sensuality and
Yeah.
seductive powers, because now I realize that there are people that they are they aren't even good looking. Like, oh my God, that nose is too big or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But they exude this aura that they have a great time with themselves
Mm-hmm.
in their body,
Mm-hmm.
and you want to be part of that party.
Totally. Totally. I was referring to this earlier. I was at this chiropractic conference. There was a minute where I thought about being a chiropractor. Chiropractors are a lot more fun than therapists. Um, just embodied, Anyways, we were at this gathering and we were dancing and it was so much fun. And there was this one guy who I thought was gorgeous. And my heart was someplace else. I was single technically, but still. Anyways, at one point he pulled me in to kiss me. I felt nothing. And such an important moment because for me, it's very much about energetics. If someone is cut off from their energetic vitality, that is also their sensuality, their sexual life force as well. And so again, like being a good-looking human does not mean that you are connected to your life force.
Yes, definitely. Definitely. You know where's also terribly evident? When you watch, I don't know, Versace catwalk, and you see Naomi Campbell walking, and then you see the next lady coming, mostly. It's like, oh no, there's a huge difference between an the embodiedly fit body of Naomi Campbell, that she's like 55 years old or whatever, and the woman, she's a panther, she's gorgeous, and then it's so hard for me to see I don't remember if it wasn't Versace, it was, I think, Cavalli, and the next girl that was walking behind her was clearly at the verge of anorexia. So pretty face and apparently beautiful body, but there's
Yeah.
there's no juice in there. And like I feel we are living in a huge cultural misunderstanding in regards to, yeah, this beauty and pleasure. And I believe that what makes someone really sexually, sensually appealing is this life force, this vitality, this aura that goes beyond, and that you can get a sense of it through movement. Like you see someone walking and you get a lot of information about the
Yeah.
state of that person. And oof,
Yeah.
also you if you sense yourself walking, you will get a lot of information on what's your current status of being in touch with this vitality. And what I'm getting is like a hint of how damaging these preconceptions, these social conditionings, these beliefs, whatever, in regards to the self-objectification of women. Like, okay, I want to be like this only to see myself through the glance of someone else, which in turns it will never, which in turn will never be fully satisfying. I don't know if that made any sense.
Yeah, I mean, what it has me think about is one of the basic foundational practices that I bring people through comes from my teacher, Richard Strozzi Heckler at the Strozzi Institute. And there's being able, a practice of embodiment, right? Your length, you can think about your length as your connection to your dignity and self-respect and confidence, right? And this is mostly what we're taught, especially as girls, like stand up straight, put your chest out. If you want to be seen by boys. I remember a chiropractor saying this to me as a kid, and I was just like, fuck you, dude. Like, because my head was in a book all the time, so my head was jutted forward. And your width is your connection to community, what you care about. You can think about other countries, you can think about animals, you can think about the land, but also it's about belonging. It's like being wide enough in yourself that you can belong. And often when we feel unsafe and we feel ashamed, we curl in this way. We pull closer to our spines, we hunch our shoulders forward and pull in. And then your depth front to back. So Pilates, by the way, just I put my, often put my hands on the ribs and have people breathe wide. It's like, so Pilates breathing is actually really helpful for accessing width, um, depth front to back, right? The front of your heart, the back of your body, and the back body being your history, where you've come from, your ancestry, and the front of your body being moving towards what you care about, and then the middle of your body being in the present moment. And so being able to can you be with all of that, like in terms of, let's bring it back to sexuality and being a woman, and you know the history of like what you've been conditioned, the social trauma of being a woman, and the conditioning around sexuality. It's all the things that we've talked about, and so that's behind you, and you get to choose, like, what do I want to take from my history and what do I actually want to move towards. And so then being in the present moment with your sensations, what feels good, what doesn't feel good, and your awareness of that. What are the signals in your body, right? Back to turn on, is there a flushing and a heat and a tingling in your genitals when you're around a particular person? Do you stop breathing? Do things get tight? Is that more of a no in your chest? Right? Does everything go blank? Do things get really still and frozen? That's a freeze. That's usually a pause. No, I don't want this to happen right in this moment. You need a moment to think about something, right? So you're feeling all of that. And the front of your body, right? Do you tend to be on the front of your feet, kind of like what's next, avoiding what your history is and what was in, or do you hang back on your feet and your body's hunched kind of a little bit like a candy cane, and your heart is pulled away from contact, or your pelvis is pulled back out of alignment, which is intelligent because it stops the flow of energy and sensation and emotions that, often live in our pelvis, right? So there's a lot. I'm definitely working with people's alignment, and seeing how does their biography live in their shape.
Wow.
Um, And it's also often very, there can be very subtle stuff. Sometimes I'm just seeing their energy. They have really good posture, but energetically, there's some ways that they're pulled in or constricted. But other people, it's very dramatic, as you described. Like you can see the way their gait and the way they walk, and maybe a collapse in length, and more, there's more shame and grief and burden. And so, yeah, there's a lot there.
So yeah, I, I am loving the like the North Star of a map to read our own bodily geography. And it makes sense. Like, okay, the past, the ancestors, or what's in front, and the uprightness and the horizontalness. And what I perceive of people that are okay with themselves, meaning they have a good time with being who how they are, and maybe even accepting, I could say Naomi Campbell or whatever, but there's a sense of spaciousness, and not only like, yeah, I am taking space, but it's an, I feel an openness that is inviting for giving and receiving. And I was doing the scanning, like, okay, yeah, I sometimes I feel that I kind of hunch when I am unsafe. But in this conversation, I am feeling like open, but not like puffing my chest forward in a military way, like, oh, okay, I am feeling like this, I am upright. And this is very, very, very useful. Would you share with us just like a cherry to put on top of this like wonderful scanning, like a little, I don't know, something insight or exercise to tap into our sensuality, our sexual or libidinal energy just for ourselves. Like, for example, if one comes from this experience of having awful lovers and not being very comfortable with the body, what is
Yeah.
something that can remind you of tapping into this energy?
So again, I think a safe place to start is to remember your senses, right? So taste, smell, touch, sound, um, and a few things, that energy follows intention and attention. So where you put your attention, your energy will go. So earlier I was referencing the pelvic floor. If you put your attention right now in your genitals, right? You rest your attention on your vulva and you breathe, right? It could just be like your slow inhale through your nose and you exhale. Imagine your, if visuals work for you, like, when there's a breeze, and the windows open and the curtains kind of flutter, you can imagine your vulva flutters with your breath. Like, you can fog a mirror. If you're sitting on a stool that has a mirrored top, you could fog the mirror with your breath. So that there's a gentleness there. And notice, just me talking about this, do you feel any difference there? Is there a different kind of quality of sensation, right? Again, that might be too much for someone. So you think about, you could have a daily sensation-based practice. Yeah, or you could pick one thing that you really enjoy. And, if you're swimming, for instance, can you focus not just on, is your stroke perfect, but how does your hand enter the water? How does the water feel on your legs against your skin? How does it feel to take a deeper breath? What do you feel like when you get out of the pool or the ocean? Is your skin tingling? Like feeling, going kind of like, what are the sensations, the qualities? Is it, sensations you can think of as, in terms of temperature, warm or cool, hot, texture. It feels muddy. It feels tingly, effervescent. Um, the size. It's a pit in my stomach, or it feels like a boulder is sitting on my chest. Like, what's the quality of your sensation? And then there's energy streaming, tingling, pulsing, throbbing. Um, Even right now, I don't want to make too much noise, but if you clap, I'll clap away from the mic. And then just hold your hands across from one another. And you can just notice, like, do you feel that kind of tingling in your hands, right? This is also why some people like impact play. They like the tingle of their skin after they've been spanked,
Yes.
you know? But so this aliveness in your hands, you've just woken up the meridians in your hands, right? This is energy. So we have this throughout our whole body, and you can have you can do a practice that comes from qigong, which is literally, it's called cupping. You can Google it, but involves basically awakening the energy um, in your body, bringing it to the surface, feeling your own aliveness. I do that with people who are more numb. I don't do that with people who are overly sensitized. So if you have too much sensation in your body, there's a different practice for you. But and I could walk you through all like the way to do a cupping practice, but I don't know if you want to go into that much detail.
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard if you can't see, it's a little harder, but I can describe it. So, and I'm not gonna do it. Or actually, is this video? I don't know. Is
Yeah,
this video?
yeah,
Oh, it
it's
is
good.
video. Okay. Let me see if I can stand up. I have a yoga class right after this, so I'm already wearing my yoga pants. Okay, hold on.
Nice.
All right. Uh, So you start with um, take your hand, and so you can imagine like what your hand is doing is it's not doing this, but intend that it's drawing the energy up, right? So first you're start here. You go from your chest. I'm not going to go through all the meridians, but I'm just going to describe what you're doing. And then you're bringing it down to your hand and you're turning your hand over. You're going up the back side of your arm to your shoulder, around the front of your chest where your shoulder meets your pec, going down the inside, which is the yin channel, back, the back side of your arm up to the shoulder. Now you can do the other side. Breathing, intending that you are moving your energy to the front of your pec, inside of your arm, down your arm, to your palm, the back side of your arm. Inhaling. You can tap your chest a little bit. Now, go to the back of the body. You don't want to ever be hard on your kidneys. You can rub them, and then your butt. You can make your hands into a fist like this. You can, but otherwise, bring down the yang channel, down your legs, the back of your legs, and as you inhale, you're starting at your ankles. Go up the inside channel of your legs. You land near your hip bones, the crease of your pelvis. Inhaling, go down the sides of your legs and up the insides of your legs. You can also tap the top of your head. These are all different, right? When we're frustrated, when we want to pull our hair like this, we're like, ah,
Yes.
I want to pull my hair out. It's an expression, right?
Yeah.
This is like gallbladder anger channels, right? So it's like, okay, you can smooth that out. If you're feeling tired, you can wake yourself up, rubbing the tops of your ears. These are all acupressure points. Again, you can get a book on self acupressure. Woman Heal Thyself is a book that was really influential for me in my 20s. You can then take your hands and notice doing all of that. Do you feel more tingling in your body? Do you feel
Yes.
more tension?
Yeah, definitely. I feel in my body.
Yeah. So then you can take your hands, you can, some of that energy, the chi that you have just gathered, and just give it to your belly. This is this area that for so many women and men, there's so much self-consciousness, right? And this is actually our center. This is what really should be home for us, you know?
Yeah.
And everyone wants to flatten it out. Everyone wants to like, have it look different than it is versus accept. I think a lot of self-acceptance comes in having a soft belly, breathing into your hands underneath your belly button. You can take another hand if you want to give some energy to your heart, wherever you want to put it, whatever part of your body needs more energy. Again, if you're feeling overwhelmed or too much sensation, and enlivening practice is not necessarily the go-to, but this is something to wake yourself up, to bring more sensation into your body or to shift your state. Okay.
Yay. Yeah, what a great state shifter. Yeah, it's like I am ready to clean the house. Or yeah, because I don't have the beloved here next by.
Mm.
Yeah, loving this practice. And it's like the body doesn't lie. Like it's like you have the instant answer when you notice how you're feeling. And I am loving all the tools that you share with us to become aware of when it's a no that is coming from our self-consent and when it's a full-bodied yes.
Mhm. Mhm.
Thank you so much, Charna. It's been a lovely conversation with you. Tell us, how can we know more about your work? How can we find you?
You can find me. So I have two websites. One is about my private practice, therapeutic work. That's passionatelife.org. And then you can read my blog. I have a book based on a course that I created, Pathways to Peace, Mindful Practices for Embodied, Vibrant, Transformative Living. The course is 20 days, or it's 30 days, 20 videos and practices that you can do each day, and kind of a foundational approach to um, starting to do self-inquiry, right? A variety of different tools. Um, Laid Open, LAIDOPEN podcast on Instagram and Facebook. So I have a podcast. There's 5 seasons. Only the last season is on YouTube, so you can look it up on YouTube, or listen wherever you stream. And you can email me. Go for charna.cassell@gmail, or you can do the Late Open podcast, but generally that works. So yeah, reach out. I do have a private practice, and otherwise those are the other ways to connect.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Charna.
Beautiful.
I'm
Thank you.
very happy to have you here, the Sensual Sessions podcast. And also, thank you, Sensualists, for being here. Go follow Charna Cassell at Laid Open Podcast on Instagram, Facebook. The last season is also on YouTube. And go to her website, passionatelife.org, and grab her book and her course. And also, if you haven't already, go download the free guide to awaken sensuality on my website, candiaraquel.com, which is www.candiaraquel.com. Until next time, remember to take the time to sense your fire so you can share the flame.